Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for another installment of the blog of my self-help video series, which is sort of combined with a kind of like a philosophical treatise, which I'm presenting in multiple parts, and perhaps not structured super systematically, because there's also a bunch of other stuff sprinkled in there from other genres of talking about shit. You know, that's me. I'm that talker. I'm that close talker. I'm speaking on various subjects, various 3 or 4s, you know. 3 or 4s, finessing on guys, yada yada yada. It's a tale as old as time. So what were we speaking on? Speaking on last video, I was a little bit like, in the here's my name and my story kind of corner. I was feeling like a newspaper article about myself, and reflecting upon my long and stunning journey. My important and incredibly stunning journey. Which is the kind of shit that you inadvertently start to believe about yourself if you see life through the prism of the story. The story. You know, stories. Incredibly powerful. Shapers of human perception. What's the story? Tell us the story. What is the story about? This and that. Then some people say, this is the story about. And then the other guys go, no. Don't you dare say that. This is the story. And yada yada yada. You have war. There's a war on. And wars, they're all about stories. You know, you probably remember how some bitch in school was like, well, we've all heard about history, but what about her story? Her story. What's her story? And, that's a good question to ask, like, what is her story? You know? I'm always curious about her story. Which, it's kind of like a boyish trait. It's kind of like a boyish trait. What was that story? You're curious about a story. That's the first step to giving it power over you, bucko. As Jordan Peterson would call you in this instance. Bucko. Hey, bucko. You are a buck. And I am De Niro in Deer Hunter. And I'm coming for you. My 308 scoped bolt action hunting rifle. Bucko. So even if you claim to be a cynic, a skeptical cynic, just by being curious about stories to begin with, you've already lost the game. So, motherfuckers out there trying to finesse some guy using various different stories. Trying to finesse them. And this is a trick as old as time, Wars, political turmoil, political, spiritual, societal, social, all these revolutions and changes have been brought forward by changes in stories. What is our grand narrative? What is our great unifying story? What is the story of humanity? The modern grand narrative is that human being is a biological organism that dwells in the world, which is on Earth. Now that's a pretty fucking crazy, like, if you'd have said that to some guy from the past, he'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Organism? Biological? The world? On Earth? On Earth? In the Milky Way? In the world? What the fuck do you mean in? I mean, you can be in and out of a house, but you can't be in or out of the world. So why would there be an abstract concept of in-world? Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself here. People have, through eons, interpreted the universe in such a diverse range of ways. From the famous dictum of turtles all the way down, of the ancient Greeks, to other combinations of large animals who somehow hold up the world. It's pretty cool. Like Atlas. I believe it was Atlas who was said to hold up the world. Atlas, the giant. So to say that our modern interpretation of the phenomenon of world is more clear knowledge than, say, an archaic one, I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think the linguistic construction "we live on Earth" can say anything by its own merit at all. It always begs the question, what do you mean by on? And what do you mean by Earth? Do we not live in the world? So why aren't we in Earth? You know, what is it about the proposition on that was deemed appropriate in that context? On Earth? Earth? What do you mean? The Earth? Some Earth? Scorched Earth? You know, if you say the world is standing on top of an elephant, which is standing on top of a turtle, that's at least something you can imagine. How do you imagine on Earth? Like, you would have had to have watched a sci-fi cartoon, basically, in order to understand anything from the phrase, we live on Earth. Like, you would have had to spend many hours internalizing graphics rendering of outer space as a like real life landscape photo before you would be able to casually refer to the quote-unquote fact that we live on Earth. You know, it refers onto the brochure. If you told a fucking Kalahari Bushman that we live on Earth, that linguistic construction wouldn't make any sense to him. And in order for you to teach it to him, you would have to also teach him rudimentary astrology and other entrenched Western thought traditions, which is like the lefty point about, you know, what education does. And you know, they call it, you know, there's a reason why they call it a university, right? Because it's supposed to be the whole universe. The all, everything understood. You know, citizens of the world. Of course, that's never worked out. That's the only idea in history that has never ever worked out. Universalism. Now, is it interesting to debate the philosophical problem of believing in universals? Not really. Not really, mate. You believe in what you need to believe or can treat yourself to believe. As is the case for so many people with beliefs in society today. They can treat themselves to having strong beliefs about shit that they could only have an opinion on because they have enough money to have that perspective. And I've done that many a time. Like everyone else does, because of TV culture. So what the fuck was I saying? Something about framework of reality. Something about just like, yeah, like taking shit for granted. You know, motherfuckers taking shit for granted. You know, they're using, you know, in their day-to-day, they're using language which image referencing is mainly done through their visual memory of looking at 3D graphics. So it's like, people get weird because of that. That's kind of like what I would do if I had some excess magical energy in me. I would like imagine cool video games that I would like to play when I was a kid. And but that is like, it's kind of sad that kids start imagining cool video games they would like to play before they start imagining just cool stories about stuff. Because it is essentially just the same, right? But a lot of people get turned into digital natives, and so their whole reality understanding is kind of seen through the lens of all these pre-packaged technological consumer concepts. So you'll have the most informed people seeing everything through the lens of their specifically iPhone, right? And so it's an iPhone type of spin on things. This is how social control is done these days. Make us all dependent on tech, and then demand control over the terms of service, and then use loopholes in contract legislation to like clandestinely create more and more total systems of control. So it's like you can often see a young person have like a really lively imagination, but still being sort of like tragically imprisoned away from its real source, which is of course nature. Yeah, spoken like a true romantic poet. Of course, nature isn't necessarily just oil paintings from the late 1800s. There's nothing more natural than putrefaction and disease. But nevertheless, our imaginative force is like everything else about us. It has its origin in nature. Which is interesting because there we arrive at yet another grand narrative. The modern idea of man as coming from nature, coming from the monkeys. This idea of the unified life that evolves and splices. The sort of super mega macro perspective of the kind of like semi-transhumanist, sort of like the Church of David Attenborough type of people, like Neil deGrasse Tyson type of stuff, where it's all about being like baked and talking about big numbers. And yeah, that is just a very recent construction as well. The meaning of the word nature has been changing. And the meaning of the word human, meaning of the word life. I don't think modern English has the linguistic capacity anymore to do justice to said narratives from the past. Because that's what a lot of people who are like religiously preoccupied with the modern grand narrative, they'll be like, yeah, and in fucking 1452 we believe that we came from fucking angels, right? times fly by, but it's like, it's our language that's changing. So like, to say that people believe they came from fucking angels or something, that still isn't going to actually express what they would have meant when they explained their understanding of themselves. Because of course all of our understandings are from the 3D graphics rendered version of the world. You know, it's from television, it's from cartoons. You know, it wouldn't have been possible to market, you know, universalism to an entire nation if it wasn't for the public institution of television, and specifically cartoons creating the framework of normalcy for all kids within a whole chunk of the world. And like, of course that would have had to be politicized from the very beginning. You kidding me? You think the people who made television didn't know what it could do? Get the fuck out of here. That's why they invented television. But like I said, you gotta have some narrative or words stop making sense, right? Of course, in public life all the good narratives are banned. But you know, whatever. I'm not here to teach you what to write in your narrative of yourself and of the world. I'm just saying you gotta have one. And you can choose. You can have a whack self-interpretation, or you can have a cool self-interpretation. And then you're just gonna have to seek out embarrassing experiences in order to keep yourself from becoming incredibly self-absorbed. Alright? You can't actually use self-awareness for anything. The only way to get less awkward is to embarrass yourself more. That's an actual self-help tip. We finally did it, guys. We finally fucking did it. So yeah, leave a like, comment, subscribe down in my pants, so I can get a feel for, you know, how you guys are receiving my content at the moment. And I'm loving your content as well, if I see it. Alright, scribbly dibblers, this has been your host, and as always, I'll see you next time, laddie.